All right, I am Josh Fiske, and we're hosting the Diversity Council Women in Politics. When it comes to diversity, a lot of folks are confused. They think it's just race and gender or maybe a disability, but it goes deeper than that. And what we want to foster is a conversation dealing with real world issues where we can, from an intellectual point of view, forward the arguments for or against. And that's our effort here today. I would like to introduce Dr. Gardner. He's been a successful entrepreneur, businessman, and currently he is a city councilman for the city of Lake Forest.
Hi, Josh. I wanted to thank El Toro Public Library for hosting us today, and to the Diversity Council. We have with us three women who are experienced in politics. We have Barbara Kogerman, who's been a mayor and council person at Laguna Hills. We have Trish Kelly, who's a former mayor from Mission Viejo and is running again for the city council in Mission Viejo. And we have Leah Basile, a first-timer running for city council in Lake Forest. You know, when I was a kid, Eisenhower was the president, and I lived in New York City. Robert Wagner was the mayor, Jacob Javits was the senator, and the idea of having women at all in a political office was almost unheard of. Now we have a woman running for president. We have two senators here from California, and so we've come a long way, baby, as they used to say. That being said, I did some research not so long ago, and I found out that here in California, particularly in Orange County, only about 30% of the elected offices are held by women. So we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. So today's seminar is to focus on women in politics in the hope that some of what we learned today, a young woman sitting in the audience may get inspired, and this may be their entree into politics. So we have a lot to learn today from these three women, and at this point, I'll turn it over to Barbara Kogerman, Mayor from Laguna Hills. Basically, we want to know here.
All right, thank you, Jim. Well, I was, here we go. A Hillary moment. I was interested in politics when I was young, and but it was always in the background. I worked on political campaigns as a volunteer. I helped found California Women's Leadership Association, which is an organization formed to encourage women to run for office, primarily based in Orange County. Was very active in my Chamber of Commerce. I became the volunteer president of that and became very political at that point as well, more publicly rather than privately. Was involved in all sorts of initiatives, countywide, local incorporations, working for Lake Forest and Laguna Hills to incorporate together. That didn't fly. Was asked to run for office numerous times and preferred to stay in the background. But finally, after my daughter was launched, and this is probably something a lot of other women go through, once I didn't have a child at home and involved in school and so forth, and got tired of just reading, and I thought, you know, it's time to step forward and run for office myself. And so I did, with my husband's help. And to tell you the truth, I probably wouldn't have done it without my husband's help, but because he had run several initiatives in Orange County to defeat the airport at El Toro. So I had a lot of background and help there. But what really helped me so much was to be issue-oriented. And I found out that our city manager was very highly compensated. I thought it was a lot. So I thought I would study the Orange County city managers, and I didn't realize my study went to an extent that had never been done before, because I looked into compensation and a lot of things that are sort of under the radar about how city managers are compensated. And I thought that would take me a few weeks. I got a few grad students to help me. It ended up taking 3 months, and the results were stunning. And the results really sort of catapulted me to the front of at least the people in my city who were running for office. There were 8 of us running at the time. And it ended up, I got editorials in the Register. It ended up that the timing has been considered uncanny, because shortly after that, the Times broke their story about the city of Bell. And Fox News contacted me, and I was their on-air talking head on the city of Bell. I'd get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they'd tell me what to read, and I'd become an expert on the way to the airport, or on the way to the studio. Had a limo come and pick me up. It was very exciting. They'd do my makeup and the whole bit. But so I became a talking head in the city of Bell, and it was really as a result of this. What my study found out was that, indeed, the Laguna Hills city manager, if you look at that chart over there, you see the cities left to right, largest city in Orange County to the smallest city in Orange County, are the bottom colors, large, medium, and small. And then you see the red line, which is total compensation, and that big line sticking up there towards the end was the total compensation for the Laguna Hills city manager. And that ended up being higher than Irvine, Santa Ana, Orange, the big cities in Orange County. And here we were the seventh smallest city with a little over 30,000 population. And so that became quite a story. And even though the numbers were criticized, I got the numbers directly from the city and from all the other cities, and I compared apples to apples. On much more conservative measures, he was the 10th highest compensated city manager in the state of California. And so when that hit on Fox News, they had, I forget how many, thousands and thousands of responses. People, it sort of opened up the idea of transparency. We found out that in some cities, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. The city managers, not because they were being devious, it's just that maybe HR had a set of numbers and facilities had a set of numbers and there were other numbers someplace else, and they hadn't really put them together. So when they put them together, they found that there was really high compensation. I was not running against the city manager, I was running against the council that I thought made a poor decision about how to compensate our city manager in a small city that's rather simple to run. It's a great city, it's a beautiful city, but it's not a difficult city. And so that was the basis of my campaign. So it was really issues driven. I was just curious, I wanted to know more. I did my research, came out with an astounding result, and that was the centerpiece of my campaign. So there were 8 running. No one had ever won as a challenger in the history of our city, which was 20 years old at the time, and I was the first challenger to be elected in the city. And fortunately, beat out the city council member running for re-election, who was the architect of the contract. So that was successful. I also put term limits on the ballot, and I will be termed out in 18. So we have the same term limits I think you do in Mission Viejo, 2 4-year terms, and you're out. And then if you want to come back in 2 years, you can. No lifetime cap. If they want you back, they can vote you back in. So I'll be termed out in 18, and I'll be happy to turn it over to a wonderful city council. I'm very pleased with. I will say, one of the things about being a woman on city council, and that's probably not true with every woman, in fact I know it's not, but I got into a council that was very contentious. There were 3 people on council, 2 people left on council who thought I was going to burn the city down. And so it was very contentious for the first 2 years until we got 2 new people coming in and we had a new majority, and I became mayor right away. I never would have been mayor before, because the council, if they don't like you, you'll never become mayor. So I became mayor as soon as we got the other 2 people in, and my job was to bring unity to the council. And I don't know if other women have this capacity to compartmentalize, but basically, if we didn't get along before, that was then. Okay, that was a blip. Whatever it is, I need to get along with you now, and we need to get along now and do the business of the city. And I need to get along with people in other city councils too. Even if we disagree on some issues, we need to get along, because it's not just our city, it's regional as well. We have to cooperate as a region. So I think cooperating with other councils as well as your own council members is really important. And so one council member who some people thought was perhaps my enemy, I would make sure that this person, I won't tell you gender, this person always felt heard. I would go up to this person afterwards, I hope you felt you were heard and had a fair chance, and was told that I was very fair. So I was trying to mend fences and bring the council together, and that was important to me. And now I think we're perhaps an oasis of civility in South Orange County. We have a very calm, deliberative, professional council, and I'm very proud of that. So it was a matter of always being interested, always being in the background, waiting until my life choices were cleared the way for me to run for council. And so I've enjoyed the leadership, I've enjoyed the results. I'm very happy with a lot of the things that we've accomplished. And primarily it's in the area of transparency and accountability for the decisions that the council makes. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Our next speaker is Trish Kelly from Mission Viejo.
Hello, I am pleased to be here today, and I am from Mission Viejo. I served on the Mission Viejo City Council for 12 years. We have 12-year term limits, and I was termed out in 2014, but our policy allows a council member to sit out for 2 years and run again, and I was encouraged, recruited, drafted. Trish, we need you back, so I am running again. My story is quite a bit different than Barbara's in many ways, because I was never interested, I never ever wanted to serve in politics or to be on a city council or to be involved in politics other than voting and being a good citizen and watching what was going on. I moved to Mission Viejo in 1977. My husband is a former Marine Corps pilot, and he was stationed at El Toro Marine Air Base, as Barbara's husband was as well. And we had 3 children and raised our 3 children here. I now have 6 little grandchildren. So my life really has been about raising children and making them my first priority and doing good things for children and for families in the community. I have been a lifetime community volunteer. I was room mom, team mom, soccer mom, PTA president, Sunday school teacher, Girl Scout leader, Boy Scout den helper. So my life really was involved in a lot of church activities and children's activities and basically being an advocate for children as well as for seniors whom I was involved with at my church. So why did I decide to run? I ran in 2002 to save a recreation center. Our former city council had voted to end a lovely recreation center, a swimming pool and a fitness center, and it was gone. It was going to be gone. And the only way to save that recreation center was for someone to run and win. Well, I didn't want to run, so I worked on trying to find someone else who would run and win. And the bottom line is it came down to me. I was well known in the city because of all of my community involvement. And so I went in very hesitantly, but with a mission to help to save our recreation center. And the recreation center, the pool was drained, the baby pool was jackhammered, the playground equipment was taken out, and it was essentially gone unless I won. I really had no idea what I would be getting myself in for as far as a campaign. Campaigns are a lot of work, but the bottom line is I did run, I did win, I did save the recreation center. It's beautiful. It's Sierra Recreation Center. Many children learn to swim there, and many seniors go to enjoy the fitness center and the swimming pool. And so that was the big issue that prompted me to run. Another issue that was very important to me at the time was good character. And I had been involved in Capistrano Valley High School as the PTA president and involved with the character organization there, the Character Club on campus at Capistrano Valley High School. And I partnered with another member of the community to work towards making Mission Viejo a city of character and bringing a character program. So one of the first things that was on my plate to do after I saved the rec center was to make Mission Viejo a city of character, and I indeed was able to do that. However, the city council did not provide funding, so as a PTA president, I still was the PTA president. That's PTA presidents just say, yes, we do unfunded programs all the time. And so volunteers and I recruited a committee and wrote our own materials for this character program, and it has won, I actually authored the program. It has won statewide and national awards, and it goes into all 25 of our Mission Viejo schools. The kids are surrounded by character posters, character words every month. We focus on a different word each month. And then my other big burning issue that I wanted to get to right away was to bring senior transportation to the city. Because I had served in my church working with the senior widows, and I found that they had severe problems when they lost their driver's licenses or chose not to drive anymore. What were they going to do? I was their senior transportation program, so I saw this as a big need, and I'm pleased to say that I was able to get that program going in Mission Viejo, and then we partnered with Laguna Hills, and they now join with us. So a senior can take a ride anywhere in the city in a taxi for $5 anywhere in Mission Viejo and Laguna Hills. And so those were basically, I found that in my life, I was an advocate for children, for families, and for seniors, which is basically everybody. And I found that I was able to do some good things and make a difference in the lives of people through serving on the city council. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Leah Basile from Lake Forest, and then we'll go to a round of questions.
I'm Leah Basile, currently running for City Council in Lake Forest, and I'm listening to both of your stories, and I hear little parts of me in both of you guys, because I'm noticing a trend that all of us have gotten involved in politics because of a catalyst. There's always something that speaks to our hearts and gets us out there to do things that we never thought we could possibly do. For me, there were a couple of things. It started, I was like you, I wasn't really involved in politics, I was just living my life, getting involved in the community, part of my church. I was on the worship team, met my husband in the band at church, and we had a family, and where we live in our HOA, we were very unhappy with how they were managing the money. We felt like they weren't doing it properly, our rates were going up, and we weren't very happy. So my husband pushed me, literally pushed me, and said, why don't you run for the HOA board? And I thought, well, okay, I'm not really interested, but I'll do it, sure. So he helped me write my statement, and I won. And 6 years later, I'm still doing it, and I turned my HOA from a budget deficit into a budget surplus, all by increasing amenities and improving services, but not spending any additional funds. So that takes me to how I got involved in Lake Forest politics. Because I represent 690 homes as president of my HOA, the city had decided to redesign a road in my community in Portola Hills called Saddleback Ranch Road. And this road had been redesigned in a manner that was completely unsafe for the residents. They designed center medians that were so wide that it forced cars all the way to the curbside. So if you were walking down the street and you held your arm out, a car would literally hit your hand. And this was a 40-mile-an-hour road. So parents were no longer able to walk their kids to school. They were afraid if their child fell into the street, there'd be no place for a car to go to avoid hitting a child. So it was actually affecting people's quality of life. They had to rethink how they were living their normal life. And I was getting a lot of requests from our residents, is there anything that we as a board can do? So I thought, okay, well, I'll go to the city council. That seems like the appropriate place to go to ask for help.
Mistake
Number one, yeah.
So I went with great hope that our city council would listen to us. And I attended the first meeting and expressed our concern and mobilized all of Portola Hills to come and help with the cause. They heard what we had to say, and Jim Gardner and Adam Nick were great. They understood and they wanted to do something. However, we have a council majority that was not interested in helping the residents of Portola Hills. So I continued to go to meeting after meeting asking for help over and over again. Meanwhile, I had my entire community mobilized. We were showing up at council meetings by the hundreds. We were writing letters to the city, begging and pleading, please, can you do something about this road? Time and again, the council majority was refusing to do anything, and I realized at that point I had to take drastic measures for the safety of the residents in my community. And so I issued recall papers for 3 of our city council members in our city. And it was miraculous because what I was told what could not be done happened overnight. That night they found it interesting enough to get it on the agenda. We were in focus groups 3 or 4 days later, and completely revised plans were approved at the next city council meeting. It was unfortunate that I had to take such drastic measures just to get the attention of our city council, who really should be caring about the residents first. And that's what got me involved. I had no intention of doing what I'm doing today, except that I realized that we need integrity in our government. We need the transparency. We need residents first. And if we have people representing us that really don't care much about us, then what good is it? I mean, we may as well live in a third world country. So I had been asked by many people, several of them are in this room, asking me to run for city council. I truly didn't want to do it. I mean, I fought with myself over it because I understood that it would be a huge sacrifice. I was afraid, to tell you the truth, because I'm a woman, and it's very imposing because I'm a mama bear and I'm thinking of my children. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and knowing how dirty politics can get, that was my first concern. And so I wanted to protect my family first and foremost, but then I realized that bad things happen when good people do nothing. And so I set aside all of my fears and concerns and decided that I think that this community there's a greater purpose out there, and there needs to be someone that can lead a positive change for the city. So I've decided to be that person. I'm very excited about the opportunity to do this. Again, it is a great sacrifice because you don't realize going in what you're really faced with, what you have the challenges to do, and I'm glad I didn't really know in the beginning because it can be really imposing. I mean, you're thinking about making huge sacrifices, but as you take each step and you go forward and you realize the good things that you're doing, it kind of motivates you to do more and greater things. I'm looking forward to being that transparency in my government. I have that skill that you have of being able to cross bridges, cover people and let them be heard and let them communicate in a way that's actually effective. I think that I could bring that change to the city. I think it's really important because it is extremely contentious. So I feel like I'm you starting out 8 years further along, walking into a bad situation and being a mom and fixing it. I love fixing things. So anyway, that's where I am today, and I'm just so grateful for the community support, because if it wasn't for the community encouraging me to do this, I probably would not have done it. So thank you.
I had a couple of questions. Thanks so much, because you covered a lot. I had to throw out a lot of my questions. But I did have some things that didn't get brought up, and because we're hoping to influence young people to get more involved in politics, these kind of questions focus on that. For example, could you talk about a role model? When you made this decision, did you have someone in mind that was a role model, or were you inventing it by yourself? And what on earth made you think that you could succeed? Any of you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll start. Back in the day, there were bracelets, and I had my own variation. I didn't make the bracelet, but I thought about it. It was WWMD, what would Marion do? And that refers to Marion Bergeson, who started out as a school board member and then ended up being the state secretary of education. She served in the assembly, she served in the state senate, the state assembly, and Orange County Board of Supervisors. A marvelous woman, a great role model. And so I thought she was fearless. She was focused on what she felt was right, and she was fearless in making it happen, and she was a tremendous person. We just lost her last spring. But wonderful lady, and always reached out to women to encourage them to run. And I just felt, if I could think about what would Marion Bergeson do in this position, then I would probably make a good decision. So she was a wonderful role model. I think Sandra Hutchins is another great role model who is in a traditionally male role, our county sheriff. The second female sheriff, I think, in our history. I think we had one decades and decades ago. She has a tough job. She's in law enforcement, a very macho field. She's got to deal with a huge force of sheriff's deputies and so forth, and the supervisors, and difficult budget decisions and other policy decisions, and I think she's also a great role model for someone who is willing to step into a male field. I never felt like women did not have a place in politics. In South Orange County, Laguna Niguel had almost all females. originally, and for a while there, I think every mayor in South Orange County was a woman. So we've had two women who've gone much further, Pat Bates and Mimi Walters, both from Laguna Niguel, one in Congress and one, Pat Bates was in the Assembly and Supervisor, and now Supervisor, Assembly, and now Senate. So she's also an example of women. We haven't been constrained, I don't think, in South Orange County. We've had a lot of women role models, and so that's been something that was helpful. I didn't feel discouraged because I was a woman.
Anybody else?
When I first began, I really did not have a role model. I just had a goal, and I wanted to set my goal and do what I needed to do to win. But as I became more involved, I would say that now my role model is Pat Bates. She had a similar start to what I had. She was a mom. She is a mom and now a grandma, but she got involved kind of for the same reasons as we have. She saw a problem in her community. She lived in Laguna Niguel, lives in Laguna Niguel, and it was a traffic issue and a safety issue for children. And she and a group of other moms would get together and they'd go out to the street where there was a problem with clickers, counters, and they would count the cars that went by and note the speeds and everything, and they were trying to be advocates for their kids, and they were dubbed as the name Moms with Calculators. And I thought, that's, and then she was elected to the Laguna Niguel City Council, and I think she was their first mayor. And then, as Barbara said, she went on and she became one of our Orange County supervisors on the Board of Supervisors, and then she went on to be a member of the California Assembly. Actually, I think it was the other way around, maybe Assembly first and then Supervisor. Yeah, right. And now she's one of our state senators.
Right.
And I'm really pleased that she has endorsed me. We've worked together for a number of years on various issues, but she really has made a difference in her community, and she started out just wanting to bring it with a safety issue, wanting to bring a problem to the attention of the people that could fix it, and then she ended up jumping in and fixing a lot of problems herself. So I have always admired Pat and feel like I have a lot in common with her. Although I don't want to go on to be a state senator or an assembly member, but
You say that today.
Supervisor.
No supervisor, no. We have really, really good people in place right now. I'm pleased with our current political members. So
On the Orange County County Board?
yes,
Board of Supervisors for Orange County?
Our 5th district supervisor is Lisa Bartlett, and
Okay.
I supported her, and she's doing a great job. She also has endorsed me, and she's a wonderful person, another really good role model.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that one. But we're staying out of politics. We're talking about diversity today.
But if you want to talk about diversity, she's an Asian woman,
Mm-hmm.
and started as a city council member.
Right.
And we have another Asian woman on council, an Asian man on council, on Board of Supervisors. So it's become certainly diverse. As Orange County becomes diverse,
Right.
it's reflected in the leaders that we're electing.
I think it's imperative that we have that type of diversity. I mean, currently on our council, we don't have any Asians or, I think that's important because that population is growing, and I think that they're truly underrepresented on our council. But that aside, as far as my role model, I have to say it's most definitely my husband. There have been many times I've walked away, being afraid of things, and he's just kind of done that gentle nudging, the I believe in you, I know you can do it. And it's really helped me. He's really a partner, and I think we all need to have that, partnership with someone to look.
And that kind of leads me to two questions that traditionally, when you talk about women in politics, Hillary, first time Bill ran, she said, I'm not the type of woman who just bakes cookies in the kitchen, you know.
What's wrong
And
with
the other
baking?
question, and the other question Hillary faced when she was running in Arkansas was, or she was in Arkansas, was that, you know, women shouldn't get into politics because they're not emotionally capable of making those decisions. So I would like to see what the panelists would respond to those two questions: the work-life balance and balancing a family, and again, the question that Donald Trump asked about women's emotional capabilities.
Well, I think we're probably all in agreement on one of those two issues, in particular, and you know, whether women are emotionally capable. I mean, that's kind of a throwback to another era. I don't really hear anybody seriously saying that today. And if they do, I think they'd be laughed out of the room. You just look around at our leadership locally. California's had 2 women senators, whether you agree with them or not, for quite a while. And you know, women can be tough cookies, and we are, you know, because we're out there. If you're going to be in politics, you have to be tough. You have to be able to take the slings and arrows, you know, and deflect them. And so it took me a while, I think, to feel strong enough to do that, to feel like I could make a decision based on what I thought was right and not worry about hurting somebody's feelings or, gee, they won't like me if I make this decision. I think that came with maturity, but it wasn't a male-female thing. It just came with maturity.
In work-life balance?
I was interested in running for office perhaps when my daughter was very young, and I was asked to run for different things, and I was actually a finalist when they needed to appoint somebody to the school board, Saddleback School Board. I was willing to do it, but I did find that I quit work to raise my daughter, and when I found myself on 5 boards and taking her to school early and picking her up late because I had to be to board meetings and all that, I decided, no, I wasn't going to do that. So I did take sort of a hiatus for a number of years to focus on raising my daughter. And when she was kind of launched is when I decided, okay, now is my time. But that did definitely have a bearing on my decision to enter public life, although I was always involved in the background, but just not in a leadership role.
I would say that as far as the emotional aspect, I think that that's one thing that makes me a stronger leader, is that I do have emotions, I do have compassion, I do have understanding and empathy, and yes, I do have emotions. But as far as in the realm of decision making, what's important to me is doing the right thing, studying the issue, listening to all sides, and then making what is the right decision for the right issue. So being an emotional person, I am an emotional person. I love people. I love almost everybody. In fact, I do. and that's a strength, and it, in a way, it can be a weakness too. But it has, as when I first decided to run, the concerns that I had expressed to me as a woman were that, Trish, you're too nice. You're just too nice. You're not gonna survive. And so when I was elected, I thought, wow, I have to keep that in mind. I want to make sure that I do this job and do it well, but I want to stay nice. If I ever have to turn into not a nice person in order to be in politics, then I'm out of here. I'm not going to do it. So hopefully I was able to prove that you can be nice and be in politics. And as far as the life-family balance, that is a big issue. And for me, when I first ran in 2002, my baby, my youngest son, was a junior in high school. So he was driving, and he was very busy and active in our church and in school, and it was a good time for me to be able to do something for my community at a higher level. And like Barbara said, my first priority when I was raising my 3 kids was raising my 3 kids. And I would not have done it if my kids had been younger, because there is a price to pay. There is a price to pay, and you'll find that balance. But I was at a good point as far as in the lives of my children. And my husband also is he's a very busy person, he's very involved, so I had his blessing, and we both do a lot for our community in different ways, and the balance has worked out for me just fine.
When it comes to someone saying that they think that women having emotions and things could be detrimental, I disagree. I think that having the emotional capacity also gives us an emotional intelligence that a lot of men don't really have, and that's not to be an insult in any way. We are designed to be different. We are unique with the qualities that we have and things that we bring to the table. So with that greater emotional intelligence, it allows us to really be able to read people better. It allows us to understand where people's positions are and be able to do what you do, build the bridges, and help people come together that maybe would disagree, but you find a commonality for them. I think being a mom is a wonderful component to being a council person, because in a lot of ways you end up dealing with some 3-year-olds when you're arguing in a room. It's true. And I've had very difficult managers over the years, working in the private sector, some that would scream and rant like 3-year-olds. And it was too funny, because the way that I found that made me easier to communicate with them was to see them as 3-year-olds, because then you can get past all of their objections, you get past their anger, and you actually get to see beyond that to what their need is. And their need is to be heard. Their need is to be understood. And I think that's where women excel. It is a sacrifice to do something like this, especially with young children. My children are 3 years old and 6 years old. I retired from Johnson & Johnson so that I could stay home with my children. It was the best decision I ever made. And I'm finding that because I'm very productive, I'm able to do a lot in a very small amount of time. I'm kind of a concentrated worker. So when the kids are asleep, I can pound out and do so much stuff. I've just managed to find the balance that's required to be able to be the mom, to be present, to do what I need to do during the day, and then to be able to devote my spare time into the things that I find important. The politics, making my community in which I live a better place, things like that. And as far as, women being in politics, the thing that I most stand by strongly is I don't want to be a politician. I want to be the mom. I want to be the friend. I want to be the person who stands in and is a regular person representing regular people. So if anyone ever calls me politician, I have to tell you, I'll be very offended.
I try not to be.
Okay, another question I had for you. Although here in South County, we do have a reasonably high percentage of women involved in politics. You go into North County and it drops a lot. But the bottom line, women are more than 50% of the population. But today, in Orange County, there's still only about a third of the elected officials, not politicians. And I agree with you 100%. But elected officials, why do you think women don't get more involved? So the three of you have been involved, to a larger or lesser extent, but why do more women not get involved in politics?
I think I can answer that. I have seen it in my own life, and I've seen it in the lives of my friends. I think that many women are so busy raising their families, and many women now are juggling a career and raising their families. And I know when my kids were young, my whole life was driving kids to Little League games and baking cookies and serving on the PTA and being at school as a volunteer several times a week. And my whole life was doing homework and helping with homework. I was full. I was very full. And that is what was important to me. And I think that many women, especially moms, are so busy with their families that they don't have the time or the inclination to get involved unless, like as with the case of all of us really, unless there's an issue that pushes them to, and I was pushed. As I said, I did not want to run. I was very happy and didn't really want to. One of my friends said, "Don't do it, Trish. It'll ruin your life." And I thought about that. I thought, oh, I hope she's not right. But it didn't ruin my life. It enriched my life, and I found that I was able to make a difference in the lives of other people. So that was worth it for me. But I think that is, in a nutshell, is one reason why more women are not involved. It's just the place where they are in life right now. So
I think also partly, you know, it's a sad statistic, but there are so many single parents. And who is the primary caregiver with single families? It's the mom. She's working 1 and 2 jobs. She's watching her children. She's trying to get them to all their sporting events and cook them dinner. That woman does not have any more time to expend on anything else but the things that are most important to her in her life. You know, and I think that's a big reason why a lot of women don't get involved. It's just such a commitment of time. You know, it's impossible for many women to be able to do that. I recently read a statistic that of families where they have a spouse at home, even though there could be 30% of the men in the country that are home with the family, only 4% of them consider themselves caregivers, primary caregivers. It's a gender thing. It really is. Women are the caregivers. We're the mothers. We're the mama bears. You know, and even in, you know, married families like myself and my husband, there's still a lot of that weight shifts all onto the woman. It's just a natural part of our characteristics, and I think that's a big component of it. Men are expected to do those kinds of things. They have more time to do those things.
I have maybe a slightly different perspective. I do a lot of networking in the county, and a lot of that is other women elected officials. And I'm thinking of Jennifer Fitzgerald, who's mayor for Fullerton, has a couple of young boys. Chris Murray in Anaheim has some young kids. Mimi Walters had young children at home. I'm supporting Janine Hefton in Laguna Hills, and she has 2 young children, your ages, yeah. So I know a lot of women who find a way to be very successful public servants while they have children at home. I just think it's a matter of where you are in your own decision making, because myself, I worked for a long time, and when I finally had my daughter, I wanted to stay home and be with my daughter. And that's because I was an older mom. And so I think if I had been a mother younger in my career, I might have decided to go ahead and move forward into the political arena. I don't know. But I do know a lot of women who are very successful elected officials who have children at home. And so I don't want to give the impression that that's the proper decision or the best decision for everybody. It's just it's an individual choice. But we do have that to consider, where generally our husbands do not, or generally the fathers do not necessarily have that to consider. So it is another layer of decision making that we have to make.
Do we have some questions from the audience?
Are we taking position, like if you're, there's Measure M on the ballot for Capital Valley School District. Are you for or against Measure M?
You're the only city.
Yeah, it's for TIF.
For us, you don't have any capital, yeah,
No.
we don't have any capital. So I'm interested in it, but I don't really think it's, you know, I don't take a position on it because it's not in my city. I am interested in it.
okay, I'm happy to address that. I am opposed to Measure M. It is another tax, and we have had we had a bond measure in Mission Viejo a number of years ago, Measure A. And I worked very hard to support Measure A and to see it get passed because I wanted better facilities for our children. And we also have a Mello-Roos district in Mission Viejo that has been taxed by Capistrano Unified School District as a Mello-Roos CFD 87-1. It has been since 1987. For just about 40 years, this section of our community has been taxed. And when I was on the city council in 2006, I called for an audit of how much money had been raised through Mission Viejo taxpayers, through Measure M, and through this Mello-Roos CFD 87-1. And how much had been raised by our Mission Viejo people and how much of that money was spent in my city. And the results were shocking. It turned out that Mission Viejo had raised the majority of the money, and the funds were being spent elsewhere. So Mission Viejo has not had a good experience with school bond measures. I am 100% in favor of children and schools and good schools, but this adding another tax is not the answer. And I think that the way that it has been put before us has not, there was not a lot of transparency, there was not a lot of information about where the funds would be spent. So I think there was more work that would have needed to be done before that was put before the voters.
Right. As far as Melrose, Leah, I read in a ballot statement by Dwight Robinson, who's running for council. Is it true that he eliminated Melrose and Lake Forest?
No, that's not something any city council can do. I mean, that's a county-wide initiative.
So he just fabricated that, I would say.
Yeah,
I will tell you, I don't want to get into the weeds in Lake Forest politics. And I can't participate in that if that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
No, I was just
Discussing
yeah.
women in politics.
Right, I was just, yeah,
And
had
if
a,
I could weigh in on that, because I am one who did help to end this 87-1 Melrose in Mission Viejo. The residents in those areas were fighting with the school district because the bond was to go on indefinitely. There was not an ending date to it, which is against the philosophy of the Melrose taxation.
got it.
But the residents were not getting anywhere with the school district, so they called on the city council and on me in particular to help them. And I did meet with CUSD officials in our city, took a position, and to make a long story short, we were able to talk to CUSD and work with CUSD and with these parents to bring this measure to an end. So I do say that I did help to end a Melrose tax in Mission Viejo.
Got it. And that's the way you were able to do it.
And it was just to put a city council member's teeth into an issue that the residents themselves were not able to make it to first base.
and to clarify with our Melrose and Lake Forest, it's different from yours because we actually did have an end date. We were told that there would be a specific date where it would end, and it did end on that date. And we just had another one that just fell off on our last property tax statements up there, but it was all scheduled. We knew when it was ending.
All right, so we have a great roadmap. I've been taking notes as we're going along as a roadmap for new people interested in women interested in politics, and it's come out as a theme, through what you've been talking about of getting involved in the church or the HOA or things, helping out on other people's campaigns, waiting for life's choices to allow you, to do it, finding an issue. In all three of you, there was an issue that was important, particularly to children and safety, and they're getting a little bit mad, I guess, helping for each of you as well. Seeing it as an extension of what you were already doing, like a next step forward in what your life had, what path your life had already set you on, and then finding a balance. And that seems to be for each of you what the roadmap that got you involved in politics. Did I miss something, or is that?
No, I think you're right. I didn't mention, I should have, but I was, when I was working, I became a member of the South Orange County Regional Chambers of Commerce, and it's changed names, but it was a Regional Chamber of Commerce. And I became an active volunteer in that, became president, which at the time was a volunteer position. And then a few years later, when they needed a new chief executive, I left my job. I was a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch making a lot of money, and I gave that up to become CEO of the Regional Chamber of Commerce. And in both cases, I felt that it was important. If you were in business, you're in politics, whether you like it or not. So in both cases, as a volunteer and then as a paid leader of the chamber, I made sure that the chamber took a position in local issues. Going back when I was a volunteer president in incorporation of the various cities, and then as CEO, making sure that the cities had representation, that the cities saw their chambers as not just an event planning organization, but advocating for fair business practices in the cities too. So that was a background that I was able to utilize just, in terms of my resume and in terms of my experience and in terms of learning leadership. So I did draw on that, and I should have mentioned that before. But there is a roadmap, and I think each of us were successful because we had a particular issue that we felt strongly about, and the residents also felt strongly about it. It was resident-driven, and we were there to provide the leadership and either fell into it or grabbed it. But it is something that we did for our local constituents, and I think every single one of these women we've talked about who've gone on in politics started out in the same way. Not because they wanted to one day be a congresswoman or a senator or whatever, but because they learned their leadership skills, they learned they were good at it, and they were able to help their communities and were able to use that for the next step.
I think there was one more question.
Yeah, I have a twofold question, actually. My first question is, have any of you experienced any gender bias in relation to your experience in politics? And if you have, what kind of barriers have you come up against? If you see it that way, or if you feel like it came in conjunction with your gender?
I don't think so. Although perhaps it's my own bias, when I started working with staff, professional staff, I was probably a little cowed. These are not because they were men, because they're so darned experienced and so knowledgeable. So I wouldn't say it was that. I just felt myself, do I really belong here? Do I have the expertise? But I got over that pretty quickly. So it wasn't really a gender thing so much, other than something I might have imposed upon myself, not imposed on me.
Right.
And,
There's a good book that came out called Presence, and they would describe what you just said as imposter syndrome. So
you're right, I've read about that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you overcame the imposter syndrome
Yes,
very
it didn't
quickly.
take long to look around and decide, I didn't have to worry about that.
I have to admit, I actually have had some gender bias. I had heard some people mention that they were concerned about me being qualified because I was a homemaker. And it makes it sound as though that's all I do, walk around the house barefoot and bake cookies all day, which I do like to do. But no, I am a highly educated woman. I've got my degree. I've worked 20 years in the private sector. I know what I'm doing. I made a conscious decision to stay home with my children, and I'm very grateful I did that. It was the best decision I ever made. But I think that is an unfortunate bias, because it limits women's ability to step out of themselves and do something that they maybe wouldn't do because someone's going to say something about them. Oh, well, she's just this, or she's a woman, so she's not as good or as capable as we are. That's where I totally disagree, and that's where I will prove them wrong.
All right.
I did not really have a problem with gender bias. In fact, I think I've heard that it almost works the other way in elections. A lot of women will vote for women, and I know that's true. I've talked to women saying, well, I'm not going to vote for any men. So it can actually be an advantage to women to be a woman. As far as I've always been treated with respect, I've never been made to feel inferior or that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I think I had one incident once over all my 12 years where a male colleague actually was talking to me in a way that was not respectful. And so I thought I've got to hit this right now. I just said, I'm not your wife, I'm not your little sister, I am your colleague, and I am capable of thinking and making my own decisions, and thank you very much, but I will not have any more of that. And that was the end. So I think that as women, we are every bit as qualified and every bit as capable to be able to do the job that each one of us feels like we are called to do. I would never discourage a young lady or a young mom or any age woman from setting her mind on the goals that she wants to achieve and then going for it. Women can do anything they set their minds to and more.
Awesome.
Well said.
Yeah, this has been a great discussion.
Fascinating.
Final words of wisdom to young or not so young women?
We have another question from the audience. Go ahead.
30-some years ago in college, the book that was heavily promoted to women was Dress for Success. Do you recall that book? What book today would you recommend? Or other books that empower women? Any suggestions?
I don't,
Because that kind of ties into the gender bias.
Even though-
If you're not dressing the part, you're not, you know.
Even though I'm a man, one I would suggest to the audience would be Presence by Amy Cuddy. She's Amy Cuddy.
Cuddy.
Yeah, Cuddy. She's a professor at Harvard, and she wrote a great book. And I've shared with my wife, and she shared it at work with folks, and it really kind of helps with this discussion. But what books have the panel would you recommend that have helped in your career?
the book that has helped me most in my life and in my career is the Bible. And it doesn't talk about, well, it does talk a little bit about dress, but as far as...
The virtuous woman in Proverbs, right? That would be
That's
the,
right.
right?
Proverbs
Exactly. That would be the
31,
Bible's
Proverbs
take on
31.
gender equity.
Yes, no, but it's my manual, my handbook for living, and it, through reading the Bible, I read it every day, I try to live it, and it gives me the guidelines I need for how to treat other people, how to do my best in everything that I do, how to have perseverance. And so really that has been my book. As far as dressing, I think that Dress for Success, I think that it is important that we do consider what we wear and make sure that we do dress professionally. And I think that not dressing professionally doesn't help us any. So I think that's important. But as far as my guiding book that I look to for everything, it's the Bible.
I have to agree. I read it every morning before I get my day started. Just helps clear my head and get things straight. The thing I like about it, besides teaching how to love one another and all the things that the Bible teaches, I love the stories in the Old Testament of leaders who were thrown into situations they didn't want to be a part of. Moses, perfect example. He didn't want to be a part of it, but he kind of got pushed forward, and then he ended up doing some great things. So that's kind of drawing on those things. We don't realize what we're capable of until we're nudged just a little bit further. So.
Well, I do read the Bible. And I'm not as good as you are about reading it every day. That's one of those goals. I can say, I gotta read it every day. I really should. But, and I read history. So I suppose that's sort of filtered down. I really enjoy reading history. Read the book, the one, Abraham Lincoln, oh dear, what's the title of it?
Lincoln?
The one, the woman wrote it, and it's about having different people in his cabinet. He deliberately exposed himself to other people of different opinions that challenged him. So he felt he was really nudged to fight for his position and to hear all sides. And I can't think of the name of it. I think Doris Collins maybe wrote it. But anyway, so I read history, and I suppose that's sort of filtered down, looking at what great leaders have done and how they made decisions, and good decisions, bad decisions. I'm particularly fascinated by Henry VIII, and those are a lot of bad decisions. So I wouldn't use that as a role model. But anyway, so reading history to me is a way of learning a little bit about leadership. And I wish I could think of the name of that book.
It'll get you
It will. It will get me.
It's a Google away.
Yeah.
Okay, any final words of wisdom for aspiring elected officials.
Don't hold back, don't be afraid.
Team of rivals.
A team of rivals, thank you.
Political genius of Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, a team of rivals. And I really think that's true. You know, there's the power of one. There's doing it because you feel compelled and you know you can make a difference, or you know you're confident that you can make a difference. So being a team of one is good, but the team of rivals is important. That you surround yourself with people who don't necessarily agree with you, but will push you to make a firm decision and make a good decision. But just don't be afraid. I mean, I did my homework. I was always in the background. I learned a little bit about politics because I'm just interested in government. But when it was my time, I just thought it was my time. So just don't be afraid. Learn, educate yourself, and step up.
We have another question from the audience.
Really quick, I was just wondering personally, as a female, what do you feel is your greatest strength that you've drawn on that has helped you to be the wonderful women that you are, and be so well balanced and be able to present yourself in all kind of political atmospheres?
I'm going to go along with what these two ladies have said, and that's firm conviction, a philosophy of life that I measure everything by, and it's spiritually based for me as well as a Christian. And I go into the idea that I'm going to love my enemies to death. I mean, no, it makes them speak that way. You know, I'm going to try to be a role model for treating others with respect, for loving others and putting them first. And so that's sort of a guiding principle. And I think having a guiding principle is really important. Mm-hmm. That may have come to me later in life than it did these two ladies. I think I would have been a much less prepared or less effective leader if I didn't have that kind of a guiding principle. To be a role model, to show that you respect each other and respect others' opinions and try to come from that place.
Yes, I agree with that as well, that having the principles of a biblical foundation and the qualities that I try to emulate. But I also found that my experience in working with the community as a volunteer, I learned so much as a volunteer. I got to know what's important to children and to families, and I talked about being a deaconess in my church to the senior widows, and then working so much with children, that my experience as a community volunteer, I think, really gave me a big advantage. My experience as a mother, really, like Leah was saying, it's those mother skills come in really handy.
Absolutely.
And not only in how you deal with other
Those adult 3-year-olds on the council.
Right. And not only with how you deal with people, but in being a mother, knowing what's important to children and what's important to families. So those have been really important issues or areas that have helped to make me a stronger leader. And then I mentioned that I wrote the character program in Mission Viejo. We focus on 12 different character qualities: perseverance, integrity, moral courage, service, self-control. I really try to every day live my life as a person of good character, and it's not just for children. Character programs are not for children; they're for everybody, and every one of us is challenged every day in our character. So that's been a commitment I've tried very hard to live in my life. Is just no matter what happens, no matter what comes up or how I'm treated, just respond with good character.
Yeah, in everything I do, I try to live a life of integrity. I want to be the person that people look at and say, I want to know her, because she knows who she is, she knows what she stands for. I always find it's easier to take that step forward when you have sure footing. So it gives me a courage that I wouldn't normally have had if I didn't know where I stood, and also compassion, the motherly instinct. I've always had that level of compassion, and I think as long as we are in touch with that, we'll never lose sight of who we're here to serve. This is about servant leadership. I mean, you don't do this any other reason. At least if you have other reasons, you shouldn't be doing them.
think that's a great point to end it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that'll be the end of our program. It's a very fascinating discussion. There'll be a YouTube channel that'll have this video, along with a community policing video that was equally as fascinating. Thank you very much for listening.